Good afternoon and welcome to the fifth presentation in our Spring 2023 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability, and I am honored that our office is able to co-sponsor this series with our colleagues in the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs, and with the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. If you are interested in the program for the rest of the series, every Wednesday, except during spring break, through April, the end of April, whatever that last Wednesday is, please go to the Office of Sustainability's website, where you will find the full listing. Or for those of you who are here in person in 255 Sykes, we have copies at the front of the room. So without any further ado, I would like to pass the virtual floor over to our speakers today, Ms. Sari Steuber. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Skip Shuda.
Great.
All right.
I can't see the screen, so are we positioned right?
Yes, that works well.
I mean, for us to be on.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brad and Westchester University for having us here today. So we're going to be talking about transition towns, giving a little bit of an intro to what they are and what we in media are doing specifically. So there are many organizations that are working to make a better world, a better future for all of us. They're working on lowering our carbon emissions, our use of plastic, reducing pollution and poverty, social and economic inequality, cleaning our streams, restoring habitats, helping to recreate the world as we would like it to be. And Transition applauds and supports all these efforts, and we do our best to further them and support them in any way we can. As an organization, though, we take a different approach than most of the others you may be familiar with. So I'll start with just a little bit of history of the transition town movement, if I can advance the screen. There we go. So in 2005, a permaculture teacher named Rob Hopkins was concerned about an impending oil supply crisis and how it would grind society to a halt because everything we do depends on oil. He decided to bring permaculture design principles to bear on the way that a town is designed. Normally it's used for agriculture. His class tried this out in Kinsale, Ireland, but then he wanted to see how it would work in his own hometown of Totnes, England. And in 2006, he wrote the manual for starting a transition town, the Transition Handbook. The idea spread quickly to other towns in the UK and in Europe, and eventually to the United States. And it caught on quickly here too. And in 2009, 6 local folks got together to read the Transition Handbook and decided to become the first official transition town in Pennsylvania, Transition Town Media, based in Media, PA. An important feature of the Transition Town Network is that it's that each town is really part of a supportive network of towns around the globe. We like to think of it as an underground mycelial network of that communicates with and strengthens each part of it, just like the fungal network that permeates our soil, that connects trees and plants and brings in vital nutrients. So we participate in a regional hub of transition towns in the Mid-Atlantic area that has monthly support calls. Transition US at the national level also provides trainings for starting and running a transition town, workshops on a wide variety of topics, and a platform for sharing successes and lessons learned. The Stories to Action section on their website has hundreds of how-to tutorials submitted by transitioners around the country, such as emergency preparedness, community gardens, civil rights campaigns, repair cafes, and even how to run an annual planning meeting. That would be put up there. The International Transition Network also has similar success stories on their website. So what is permaculture? in case you were wondering about that. Permaculture is a design methodology that's primarily used for agriculture, designing farms and edible gardens in a comprehensive way. These are their foundational ethics: earth care, people care, and fair share, all equally important. And fair share ensuring that the earth's resources are utilized in ways that are fair and equitable and wise for both the present and future well-being of the entire biosphere. There are 12 basic principles designed to take a systemic view of the project at hand, looking for all the components of the project, the inputs and outputs, resources and products, and especially the way in which they all interact with each other. Step number 1 is to observe, and it's recommended to do that for at least a year before making any changes. Most of us like that. So like permaculture, transition takes a whole system approach. We see life as a full circle. Everything we do touches on everything else in our environment. Every being is integral and indispensable to the ecosystem that we're all part of. It's important to see the relationships between us, the land, the sky, the waters, the sun, the moon, all our four-legged beings, finned beings, flying beings, the trees, the plants, the insects, all our relations, as the indigenous people call them, are worthy of our love and respect. They hold a lot of wisdom if we seek to learn from them. The upshot of this design approach is to notice that many of the systems that undergird our society are failing, and that we need to regenerate them in ways that will provide us with the future that we want, rather than the one that we're heading for. The mindset that has brought us to this state that we're in cannot get us out of it. As Einstein has said, we can't fix our current problems with the same thinking that created them. We need a shift in consciousness, a new mindset.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context that we find ourselves in as we come into wake up in 2023, and we find our world more polluted, more divided, more isolated. I've included 3 graphs here that kind of illustrate some of the macro problems that we're trying to address as a society. You know, the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is dramatically impacting the global climate and the temperature of the planet. I noticed on Twitter that Greta Thunberg has on her profile that she was born at 375 ppm. And I thought that was kind of interesting, which led me to find this graph. And I found that I'm born at the beginning of the curve, back when the dinosaurs were still roaming the planet, around 61 at 318 ppm. So this is a critical statistic that really impacts our planet, and we'll talk a little bit about how some of our initiatives are really meant to address that. But other things are happening in parallel. So we have record levels of teenage depression, and at the same time, an inadequate coverage of people actually receiving treatment for that depression. You know, the number of mass shootings has just been climbing rapidly. And, you know, a lot of times we look at these problems and it's very difficult to wrap our arms around them. They seem like such big initiatives or such big issues that we're trying to address that they seem insurmountable. And worse, sometimes our response to these scenarios is what we call sort of a first order or kind of a knee-jerk reaction. So, you know, you think, well, there's a school shooting, well, let's arm the teachers. Or there's a shooting in a mall or a theater, and we say, well, let's encourage open carry. Everybody has a gun. And what ends up happening is a lot of times these knee-jerk reactions end up creating more problems and unintended consequences as a result. So what we're trying to promote are really what we look at as sort of second-order solutions. And they may seem like, wow, gee, we're doing a lot of different things. But the reality is, as Sari said, there's a weaving of this mycelial network between these initiatives. So they end up supporting each other and help us create a more resilient and sustainable and localized community. So let's take a look at the promise on the horizon. So with Transition Town Media, we're really trying to focus on sustainability, resilience, and localization. These are values that really help promote a healing environment at the community level. And there's also a shift in consciousness taking place. So, social scientists tell us that if we can get to 10 or 15% of the population sort of practicing or endorsing a particular worldview, then that becomes a tipping point where you start to see a much more rapid adoption of the changes. So a lot of our work in Transition Town Media is meant to be healing for our immediate community and for the people that live there. It's also meant to be an exemplar that we can bring out and talk about and use as a learning, a living laboratory, if you will, for us to help future-proof our communities and try to find ways that we can actually improve things. At the same time, we see some high-level things like policy changes, like the Inflation Reduction Act that has $369 billion for climate change. We see new technologies, the idea of nuclear fusion ignition being demonstrated. So there are global initiatives that have sort of a top-down effect on climate change and sustainability and resilience, but we have to meet them with bottom-up initiatives from our communities. And that's what Transition Town is all about, trying to really build those bottom-up initiatives and future-proof the community, all the way from reducing our waste stream, community weaving, to increasing our biomass, to detoxifying our yards, to providing personal space for grieving, growing, and regenerating.
So these are ideas that we came up with at our 2023 annual planning session. As you can see, our work spans a wide range. Our members choose areas that most call to them, and they select projects that seem the most compelling and impactful. And then they work in small groups. Then we come together at steering meetings to share our work, our successes and challenging, and get input, support, and inspiration from each other. So the broad categories of our work encompasses are shown here: the environment, including our Protecting Biodiversity group and related projects; zero waste, including our composting and plastic bag ban initiatives; the health group, including Media Eats Local and their foraging group; local economy, including our Circle of Aunts and Uncles, the Free Store, Hemp Study Group, and more; community building events, and such as our street mural painting projects, our fire circles, working with youth, and inner work, such as our solstice events and courageous conversations. And we'll go over some of those initiatives in more detail now. So this is our Free Store. It's 8 years old, and the intention is to have people bring things that they no longer need or want, instead of putting them in the trash, and then other people can take them for free. And it basically gives us a way of reducing trash, but it also creates a sharing economy, which is a community where people can understand that sharing our goods creates more of a feeling of abundance rather than scarcity, which is what our current economy kind of flourishes on. So it's an economy project, but it's also a zero waste project and a community building project.
We also have a biodiversity group that got started last year, and it's taken off like wildfire. It's really focusing on improving the health of our environment, which, if you think about it, is a form of infrastructure. It really helps us to increase our biomass, like by removing carbon from the atmosphere, and improves mental health. It's a proven reduction in crime and anxiety levels when you have a more biodiverse environment, so trees and plants and wildlife around you. You're going to see that we have a lot of examples of educational and awareness programming. This year, we're going to be doing more work with a partner organization called Keep Media Green on their Green Wagon project, where we provide native plants to local residents through a system that's sort of like the little lending libraries, but instead of lending libraries, we have little wagons that have starter plants that people can take and put right into their yards or on their balconies if they want to do container gardening. We're also looking at a community eco-fest. Our group was involved with having Media Borough become a bee city and designated as a bee city, and they built a pollinator garden on the borough grounds as well. So there's a lot of focus on education. In particular, this year, we're also taking on sprays for like mosquito spraying and pesticides, trying to reduce the use of those and introduce all healthy and natural alternatives to pest management.
We work closely with the Media Borough Environmental Advisory Council, which Walt Kressler here is the head of, on most of our zero waste projects. An early one that we tackled was to create a borough-wide weekly curbside pickup of kitchen waste from the residents, which is taken to Linville orchards to compost. And then the finished compost is actually returned to the borough residents, which is really, really wonderful. The purpose of this program was to reduce the trash that media sends to the Chester City incinerator, and to regenerate this waste into healthy soil for growing more food. Other projects we've worked on with them are the plastic bag and straw ordinance, including researching alternatives that the media businesses could substitute for plastic bags and other items. And we're also working with the county on their sustainability plan.
I'm going to talk about the Circle of Aunts and Uncles. It's something that we put together. We were inspired by the work of Judy Wicks, who is a sustainability pioneer. If you don't know of her work in Philadelphia, she also started a Philadelphia Center Circle of Aunts and Uncles. And really what we're trying to do is provide a caring, listening, and supportive network for entrepreneurs and small businesses that are under-resourced. You know, a lot of us may have an aunt or an uncle that we can go to get some initial funding, or a successful cousin who started a business, and not everybody has that. So the Circle of Aunts and Uncles seeks to fill that gap, tries to help people mentor businesses, and how do they get to the next level, and then provide some small low interest loans to help them do just that. So we've been working with a couple of businesses. Last year, we signed up 2 businesses in Chester. One is CMP Radio. Actually, he's been with us for more than a year, where he provides internet radio services to the community of Chester, and also provides podcasting services and sort of mobile recording studio services. And RNN Enterprises, which is a boutique, clothing boutique, and sort of wellness and health products as well. And he also provides a lot of service to the community for returning citizens as people are leaving prison. He provides them with resources to help them get back on their feet. So 2 great organizations in Chester that we're supporting.
So we also support growing and having access to local food for environmental and health reasons. And small farms and gardens can grow food without using harmful chemicals or mistreating animals. And local farms avoid the necessity of transporting food for long distances, using fewer fossil fuels, generating less pollution, and producing fresher food. So the Media Eats Local group has compiled an online resource guide to local food that can be found around media, in farms and CSAs, farmers markets, restaurants, and retail stores.
We have the hemp study group, again, a new addition in 2022. The hemp study group is hosted by a couple in Drexel Hill and has grown very quickly, and really been focused on demonstrating the versatility and high function of the hemp plant. Many of you may know or may not know, but hemp was caught up in the reefer madness craze of the 1930s, when it was sort of lumped in with cannabis, which can have an intoxicating effect. Well, hemp is a version of cannabis that doesn't have any intoxicating effect, but can be used for fiber, can be used for food sources, can be used for cosmetics. There's a wide range of applications. And we had a number of events last year. We had cooking classes, craft making. We went on some field trips to some hemp farms in Pennsylvania. We had a courageous conversation where the PA State Senator Tim Kearney came as one of our speakers, and we had some panelists talking about industrial hemp, how hemp can be used for building, microgreens. So we're really excited about where this group is heading in 2023. We had a $2,000 grant that we received from the Department of Agriculture. We're going to be using that to produce some podcasts. So actually was involved in our first podcast yesterday. And this is where the Mycelium Network comes in as well. So JP Bryce from CMP Radio actually helped us produce that podcast. And we're going to also be working on creating a hemp pallet house on some private land. So we'll be taking pallets and stuffing them with hempcrete. So there's a lot that we're going to be doing in 2023 with hemp.
And another one of our favorite events is our Green Sunday Holiday Fair. We put this on every year to bring local artisans and craftspeople together to sell their wares. This is an alternative to Black Friday. We usually have it right before Thanksgiving. And the Green Sunday Holiday Fair supports our local small business economy, keeping their money within the community and allowing consumers to buy unique and handmade gifts from the makers themselves, rather than from an anonymous online catalog.
So we also have a foraging and fire circle group. That's actually two separate groups. I'm going to talk about both of them. They're both sort of very kind of grassroots, spur of the moment, depends on the weather. So with the foraging group, we will organize occasional outings. We have one of our members who's an expert forager, and we scout for edible mushrooms, nuts, berries, fruits, tubers, and more. They're generally impromptu meetings, again, dependent on weather. We also organized a plant walk last year in one of the local parks, where we learned how to identify, harvest, and consume common herbs and do it in a way that makes us good partners with the land. The fire circle, one of my favorite activities, fire circles are one of our most primal community building activities. And with the trends of COVID and work from home and Zoom meetings, a lot of us lost the opportunity to just make random connections with people from our community. So this is an opportunity where we can connect with friends, with neighbors, with strangers. We had 5 circles in 2022. Sometimes they're theme-based, so we did some solstice celebrations and things like that. We had topics occasionally, and then other times we did sort of a less is more. Let's just show up. People bring whatever they want to for the evening, and we just gather around one of our members' fire circles for the evening. So it's really helped us to strengthen and build our community mycelium.
One of the permaculture principles, if you recall, was people care. In transition, we believe that nurturing and supporting our members' well-being is as important as the work that we do. We find opportunities to nurture spirit in events like the solstice and equinox celebrations, restoring our connection with nature and the earth's rhythms. We also have an inner transformation group that focuses on evolving to a higher state of consciousness via many different spiritual paths, such as communing with nature, shamanism, Makerism, Buddhism, Native American wisdom, quantum physics, meditation, strengthening intuition, and more.
So this is our closing slide, and it's really about news stories. So I talked about future-proofing our communities. The power of the human animal really comes from our intelligence and our ability to communicate. We communicate through stories and our beliefs. We need to learn how to step outside of our lines and sort of deconstruct and move past some of the old stories that we've told ourselves for generations. And really ask questions like, are manicured lawns really more beautiful than a pollinator garden or a pollinator meadow? How can we connect more deeply to our neighbors and our community? What can we do to keep trash out of our landfills and incinerators? Can we really change the impact of the CO2 levels in the atmosphere by taking action in our own yard? What we do at Transition Town Media is really challenge ourselves to reimagine the way we think about the world and to help future-proof our community. And we welcome your questions, your ideas. We'd love to see this mission taken up in other communities. Here's some of our contact information, and So we can open it up for
I
conversation.
think we've got some time for questioning.
Yes.
All right.
Anyone for questions?
Sorry, could I just ask you to repeat a question from here so that folks online will know what the question is?
Anybody?
Well, while you guys are thinking of questions, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, because sort of like, where do we go from here is one of the things that we're always thinking about. And, you know, this conversation is part of where do we go from here, sort of getting the word out to other communities, talking to people, sharing some of our lessons learned. But we're also looking at, right now we're in conversations with a group that's called Cool Cities. And they have a model whereby they scale from block to block, and then blocks grow together to create neighborhoods, cool neighborhoods, and from cool neighborhoods to cool cities. We're not sure yet whether we're going to move ahead with that, but those kinds of initiatives are things we're always thinking about, like how do you get the scale, right? Because if it's a bottom-up initiative, what we do in media is only going to have so much of an impact. But what we do in Pennsylvania or in Delaware County, in Chester County here, you know, that starts to get some scale onto the state, onto the country, onto the world. So just wanted to mention that.
I certainly have some questions.
Okay.
I'd like to start by hearing more about the organization itself. Who have become members? How do you become active? How does Transition Town Media interact with, say, borough government and the county government, and perhaps other members of the media community who aren't members of Transition Town? I'm really curious about how you reach out, how you
Right. Well, just to give a little history behind this, one of the, if you remember the permaculture principle, the first principle is to observe. And so we did that in media. We checked out the different organizations that were doing things in media and got to know them. So we had like one-on-one conversations with a lot of the other organizations who were doing great things in media, including the Environmental Advisory Council, which, you know, was already doing a lot of the stuff that we were interested in seeing happen. So, so that's where we start. And then we had monthly awareness raising groups. We started actually with a small group of 7 individuals, which Transition calls an initiating group. And so that was the kind of groundwork that we were doing as a group. And then we started with awareness raising events. So every month we would have an event on a different topic. Our very first one was, what is a transition town? And then we moved from there to permaculture principles in your backyard. And that's where we started a food group. So our very first meeting, we had about 70 people there, which really astonished us. We were pretty impressed. And we got a mailing list. So we had a mailing list of people to send out information to. Our second meeting, we started the food group, which is one of the working groups, as I was saying, that we have people kind of coalesce into groups based on their interest. So the food group took off, and the very first thing that they did was to start a farmer's market in media, which had been on, you know, kind of something that they wanted to do for ages. So we were really impressed. Wow, our first big initiative, right? But it just sort of goes from there. So then we started an energy group that did things like home weatherization kinds of stuff and energy audits and that sort of thing, and eventually ended up with the Solarize campaign, and so on. And so in the process so as we grew and got more and more people interested in more and more things, all these different groups, as I said, come together in a steering group so that we know what's going on in the whole, so everybody's not just focused on their one thing, but we know that we're doing stuff over here and over there. And eventually some of these things really get some real momentum. For example, working with the Environmental Advisory Council, we've been able to do a lot of great projects that we wouldn't be able to do just as an outside organization, including the composting program and the plastic bag and straw ordinance initiative. in the Bee City initiative, which we started through them. So it's so then we get a little more momentum that way, and then we kind of started looking, well, what about the county? I mean, there's more things we could be doing in the county, and in fact, our Solarize program kind of spawned a Southern Delco Solarize program, and that some other group is running, and actually the Solarize Philly program, which is really exciting. But so we started working on the county level, and we were invited to become one of the people on the sustainability plans committees, subcommittees, working on various projects. So, you know, on climate change and energy and health and well-being and so on and so on. So it's you know, we just kind of keep growing like our mycelial network.
Very organic.
Very organic.
A lot of ways. I'll just layer on one or two other things on there. So our initiatives for the year are set on an annual planning, usually in January or February. We have an annual planning day, and we decide whether we're going to start new initiatives. We typically look for 3 members and someone who's willing to be a leader, at least 3 members willing to sort of get a group started. So that's kind of the bar that you have to cross. We have the monthly steering group meeting, which is effectively our board meeting. As long as there are 2 officers, we have 5 officers, formal officers. But if we have at least 2 of those officers present, that steering group really becomes our board meeting. That's the way our bylaws are written. So it's a very organic process. It's very open. We have members of the public who come in and you know, they just start contributing where they feel called to. So that's a little bit about how we operate.
And also I mentioned a Mid-Atlantic regional group. Another thing that we try to do is encourage other transition towns who want to form in the area. In fact, we just have a new one here in Westchester. I don't know if you're aware of that. But we were happy to get the Phoenixville transition town started just a few years back, and they're going like gangbusters. We're really, really proud.
Do one quick thing here, but I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, you know, thank you for the work that you do. It all seems really valuable. I'm sure it goes a very long way. Pretty impressive. Different areas that you focus on. I was curious about a couple of things. I may have missed this because I came in late. I apologize, but are you primarily membership based or grants? Primarily, how do you get funding for this kind of work? And then my second question is just, you know, you have internship opportunities.
Yes.
Repeat the question. Questions about funding and internship opportunities.
So we aren't exactly membership based, but we do most of our funding comes from our members' donations. We also, strangely enough, get a lot of income from our free store. We have a donation jar in the free store reception desk, and people throw money into it. It's a pretty sizable amount. So those are our 2 primary functions, ways of getting funding. And then we do occasionally look for grants. So we've gotten a few grants along the way. We try not to get grants that are focused on doing something particular, because we want to be able to have kind of a free range in what we do. And as far as internship possibilities, absolutely, we love to work with students. I think, you know, students are a very important focus group, if you will, of people that we need to engage in this kind of work, because frankly, you are the future. You're an aging population here, especially.
Yeah, and I would say last year we did work with some student groups. We had University of Sciences in St. Joe's. They had a class that was they had some of their students working with us. So I know I worked with some of the students in the hemp study group. They put together recipe cards, And we actually have now that's an asset of the hemp study group, where we have these recipe cards of how to use hemp in making pizza, cookies, and sauces, all kinds of great stuff. And we are working with a group in Swarthmore this semester as well. So we're always open to sort of trying to integrate students. Of course, it's a temporary, transient population, sort of students. They graduate from the class, and then you have to sort of reintegrate. But we're always open to that and love to have student projects where we can.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to throw out there, Westchester does have a pretty great environment and sustainability. I'm not graduate myself, but I always like to think long-term partnerships that could be made where, I'm a huge fan of experiential education.
Absolutely.
Kind of adoptable, but, partnering with local organizations, businesses, trying to give students the opportunity to see what's being done locally. Especially if there's a Westchester chapter. I'm just trying to plant the seed of maybe in the future, as students potentially enroll in the minor, there could be some kind of great partnership, or even just a meeting like this to kind of showcase the work that you're doing, give students a little break.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's really important if it can be worked in with your coursework. In fact, Media Borough had a group of Bryn Mawr students, Bryn Mawr College students, working on them as in part of their curriculum to do energy audits and other analyses of the work that the borough was doing with their trying to reduce fossil fuel consumption and pollution and so on. I'm sorry.
One of them is carried over to this semester.
Yes, one of them is now doing an independent study with the borough. So because part of the problem with the student population is that they are mostly focused on their classwork. And so unless this can be part of that classwork, it makes it more difficult for them to take the time and really the energy and focus that it requires to do a real project with an outside group. So talk to your professors and get them
So it's good to hear that
include their
there's a sustainability minor available in Westchester. So that's good
Yeah.
to know. Yeah.
yes.
As somebody who utilizes to get here, how easy is it to take public transportation to your events?
How easy is it to take public transportation to our events? Well, in media, first of all, a lot of our events are on Zoom, but the ones in person, media is really blessed to have a trolley that runs down the middle of State Street that you can take to Philadelphia and anywhere in between. We're also really close to a train station that is a regional rail line that goes into Philadelphia and now goes out to Wawa, in fact. We also have various buses, one that goes to Penn State, for example, one that goes to Chester. The bus system is not nearly as robust as we would like it to be, but transportation has always been an interesting issue for us because it is a primary way that people use fossil fuels and pollute the atmosphere. So it's an issue that has been raised a lot of times, and we haven't really kind of come to grips with it. But someone right now is pushing for it, so it may
One of
end
our
up.
members is very interested in sort of transportation and that sort of issue. And I'll just add the trolley ends at 69th Street, and the SEPTA regional train goes down to 30th Street. So and then continues on to suburban Jefferson.
And Temple, and
Yeah,
so
and Temple. Yeah.
And the commuter rail line is here to Westchester.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, okay.
there is a commuter line that comes, Unfortunately, it doesn't go across. You have to go into 69th Street and then back out again. It's kind of crazy. Yes.
I was going to say, that was one thing I noticed a lot when I was looking at your projects, which all of them are really great, really glad that you're promoting pollinator gardens, like burning bonds, all that stuff. But like, as you said, transportation is a major contributor, at least for the average American, to think one of the biggest challenges that I see is that it has to happen on a county or state level. I don't know if you guys know this, but SEPTA doesn't receive any funds from Chester County in terms of like in order to run service. So there's less of an incentive to even provide service. And so that's one of the things that I think about in terms of increasing bus service, transit, all that kind of stuff. And it just has to happen at a really high level, which goes against a lot of the organic principles I see. So I just see that clash.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is an ongoing conversation. In fact, we've had a couple of working sessions where we talked about that, and that's one of the things that came out. It's like, wow, you're really trying to affect SEPTA and some of these, quasi-governmental organizations. It's a challenge, but there are things, you talk about ride-sharing programs. You also talk about potentially impacting zoning regulations. So, one person pointed out to us that when you do new building, you always have to have parking associated with that. And that's in the code, the building code. And that in some ways, it's almost like building oil pipelines, right? You're building infrastructure that promotes the continuation of dependence on fossil fuels, right? So it's like, well, maybe we should have no parking or no driving zones. So, maybe there should be green zones in the town. So those are conversations you can have at least at a community level.
Yeah, I think that's also really important to mention is that while I see, as much of a bigger issue, there are things.
Yeah.
And part of your mycelial network is the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission.
right.
Sari's been part of conversations about attending these meetings. Members of that, I was member of the EDC for a while.
Right. Who started the bike plan in Philadelphia, in media.
So for those of you who may not have heard that, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is a group that also has a lot of influence on this kind of environmental planning. So can be a good partner for this kind of work. And has been a good partner.
I have a question. A lot of the descriptions you did of some of the initiatives that Transition Town Movement is involved in, some of the purposes, I think that language would resonate with many people's spiritual backgrounds. I'm wondering, is there any sort of spiritual or religious foundation to the Transition Town Movement? Do people bring that into their work with the group?
So there isn't any real religious background to Transition Town. But a lot of people do see it that way, that it does resonate very closely with their religious. And we have spoken to a lot of churches. In fact, the Free Store is in the Methodist Church in Media, and we've spoken to their service a couple of times about the Free Store and other issues, and as well as other religious groups. And we're very, very closely allied to the Quakers in Media, which are very strong influence there. And there's certainly a lot of connection there between their principles of sustainability and taking care of the earth that resonate with ours.
Yeah, and I would say, certainly we're a non-denominational organization, but we also have, with our fire circles and some of these, sort of respecting and honoring the cycles of the earth and the solstice and things of that nature. There are elements of shamanism that might be in there, or things that, but we're not asking anybody to subscribe to any particular view, but there may be practices that we bring in if we want to do a grief ceremony around the fire, for example. There are practices where you can, sort of go through your grieving process, package it up into something that's offered into a fire as a release, for example. And those are certainly very spiritual practices, but no particular religious denomination.
So, everything you guys are doing sounds fantastic, but I live up in Norristown in Montgomery County. I want to know if you guys have anything before.
any transition town that's a bit more local to me, because the idea of doing something sustainability wise by driving a 40-minute trip one way kind of sours it a little bit.
Yeah. I'm afraid I don't know of anything in Norristown area. That is a bit of a stretch, yeah.
I know you mentioned Phoenix.
Phoenixville would
Phoenixville
be,
might-
yeah,
a
a
little
little closer for you,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, they have a great group there. They're just,
Because
But if you want to start a group,
Oh,
you
yeah.
get, we'd be happy to sit down with you and talk through the process.
I'll probably busy student life.
yes, right.
But we do have, I mean, we have some people who used to live in Media and now they live in Phoenixville and they come to events occasionally because they know the community. And we're certainly not specific to Media. We call it now Transition Town Greater Media because we really address the whole southern Delaware County area, I'd say.
One more question.
Sure.
You talked about some of your collaboration with students at some local institutions of higher education. Is the transition town movement in general, or specifically in Media, does it involve a lot of generational representation? Do you have older people, middle-aged, young people involved, or do you see that there's an opportunity for you to reach out to some groups that might not be as active right now in the work you're doing?
Well, our membership tends to be on the older side, retired folks like me and, middle-aged people with families, young families especially, have a harder time finding the time and energy to involve themselves in something like this. But everybody does what they can. We've had a harder time reaching out to younger groups, student groups, and we'd love to do more of that. So any opportunity we have with both college and younger student groups would be well appreciated.
Yeah, we're always looking for ways to try to broaden our reach in terms of the diversity of age and diversity of membership. So it's a constant conversation.
Thank you. We are at 12:50, so anyone either online or here in person who needs to get to a class or a meeting, please feel free to take off. Do you have time for a few more questions if
Sure.
people would like to say? Okay.
You bet.
But before that, let's give one last thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Great. And let's see, there is one question online, which is there a contact info for the Westchester group? One of our online folks.
I don't know it offhand, but I can certainly send it to you.
Okay. My guess is the Westchester Green Team members would know about it.
That's right. They've actually kind of become part of the transition town, Westchester Transition Town.
Right.
So if you know them, then that's the contact.
Good.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with you guys on,
Mhm.
since I'm kind of familiar with what you are doing. The question in my mind was the where to next. And you mentioned the cool cities and you were looking at that as a possible model. Can you tell us more about what the cool cities model is and where you see?
Sure. Yeah, it's something, one of our members brought this to our attention. One of our members does a lot of work with the UN, and she became aware of this initiative through the UN and some of the sustainability goals that they have. Apparently, it was started by a guy named David Gershon, who's an author. He's written, sort of something like the 5,000, how to lose 5,000 pounds, in a month or something, sort of a carbon diet. But they started mostly in California, and they have, I think at this point, 350 pool blocks. Block is roughly represents 20 households, and they look for like 5 to 8 households participating. And really what they're doing is sort of a monthly meeting kind of environment, and they take actions across a number of dimensions like carbon neutrality, sustainability, regenerative growth. So a lot of the actions are projects that we're already doing in Transition Town. But back to the question of engaging some of the other community members, this might be a way to kind of package it up and say, hey, by the way, we're doing this initiative, this particular area, we're all going to try to plant, some native plants in our yard this year, or we're all going to try to get everybody participating in the composting program. The buckets are free, so all of a sudden your neighbors are doing it as well. It might be a way to actually amplify and accelerate that. They're looking to actually take that out. They're piloting in other parts of the world. So they're looking at some European cities, and we had a conversation with them about media possibly participating as well. So we, again, very exploratory early on in the conversation, but they see a lot of the structural components in place to be a successful pilot here on the East Coast, where they don't really have any representation. So.
Yeah, and the whole idea really is not only to engage people at the individual level, which is, I think, an important thing to do. Media is a very forward-looking town, but not everybody in town is really up on all the things that they could be doing to be more sustainable. So you engage on the individual level, but then it quickly can spread to your neighbors, and then more of the blocks can kind of glom together into a bigger neighborhood section, and pretty soon you're covering the whole city. So well, I don't know about pretty soon, but soon enough. So it's a way of really getting into a grassroots level of engagement, but and starting on a small level, but growing into a much more larger scale.
Yeah, and they have methodologies. So they're also looking at key performance indicators. What are the metrics that we're going to track? How do we know that we're actually making an impact? It's something we're trying to get better at as well, so we can actually speak to the numbers, but that's sort of baked into their methodology.
Are there examples of Transition Town organizations, groups that have been established in larger cities? I live in Philadelphia, and this model is really intriguing. It's hard to imagine, initiating it for the city of 1.5 million people, but
Yes.
perhaps my neighborhood, or are there models of this type of thing?
I'm not sure there are models across the world. I know that in the United States, it's been a hard sell. There was a Transition Philadelphia group which couldn't quite get off the ground, and it's sort of split into little parcels of groups. There is one in Cheltenham that seems to be doing some good work, and then there's a couple of just individual people who are, organizing their blocks and so on in Philadelphia itself. So a neighborhood concept is much better when, I guess the problem that they were having is which neighborhood should we pick, because they were all in different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Transition Pittsburgh has a similar problem as well. There is a really viable transition town at State College. I guess it's called Transition Center County, but is based in the Happy Valley, and they're doing amazing work there as well with the university.
There's an organization that I always like to look at. It's called Cooperation Humboldt, which is not a transition town strictly per se, but I think they follow a lot of the same principles, and they've done a lot of work at sort of the community level, also engaging with the indigenous population. So some of the they're doing some tribal work and that's sort of integrating their work. And then what they've decided to do is, I like is they've sort of created these cooperative economies you know, where they build this whole supply chain out, and then they can get funding, outside funding to support that economy, and then it's sort of a virtuous circle as, you know, everybody's sort of participating, and then all of a sudden there are jobs in that space, and they can advance their goals. So interesting group to look at if you want to see some how it might operate with a little more scale.
Questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
For sharing your work and your stories with us. Great addition to the seminar.
We appreciate the opportunity.